go ahead and get started. Welcome to the Poached panel on rebuilding the industry with equity. My name is Ashley, and I'm going to be the moderator today. It's fantastic to see so many people interested in this topic and joining in to listen and participate in the discussion. If you're here, you're familiar with Poached, but many of you may not know that the majority of us actually come from the restaurant industry. And we have a genuine passion and love for the industry. We'd love to see it thrive. And so we wanted to put on this panel because it's clear over the last decade or so, there's been some tension building around hospitality employment. And, you know, it's not the easiest of jobs. There's long hours, pay disparity, low wages, and it just generally doesn't come with a lot of supportive tools. You don't enter the industry thinking that you're going to get health benefits or profit share or paid time off. And in general, this is kind of dealt to a mass employee burnout in our industry. And it's something that we just kind of always dealt with. But then the pandemic happened and our industry was turned upside down. And all of a sudden work became just that much more stressful. While that wasn't the majority of the reason, it was definitely a factor. And throughout the pandemic, Poached has tried to keep in touch with our worker audience. And, you know, the general feeling is that people wanted to come back. They still want to come back, but they hoped that, you know, with this opportunity of reopening, we could rebuild the industry with a little bit more support and offer more sustainable career opportunities. Of course, on the other side, being an employer isn't easy. There's a lot of challenges. You're up against tight margins. You know, change at this level can seem very daunting. Moving against the status quo of entry-level employment is challenging, both operationally and financially for employers. But the truth is, you know, businesses are taking steps to provide more for their employees and, you know, professionalizing the industry. And it really just starts with a conversation, leaning on one another, learning from your peers to see how we can all take steps to create the industry we'd love. So without further ado, we have Jodi Mozeika. Jodi is the business team manager at Black Star Co-op in Austin, Texas. Black Star is the world's first community-owned and worker self-managed brew pub. Jodi has become actively involved in the Austin, Texas community, representing Black Star through legislative action focused on workers' rights and social justice. She is also a founding member of Good Work Austin, which is a local nonprofit that's focused on building a better hospitality industry while feeding community members struggling with food insecurity. So thank you, Jodi, for being here. Next, we have Cami Wong. Cami is a partner and director of operations at Cafe Olli in Portland, Oregon. Cafe Olli is an all-day cafe that makes simple food from locally sourced and seasonal ingredients. Cafe Olli believes that the only sustainable future for the hospitality industry comes from more equity, democracy, and transparency. They're committed to doing everything they can to play their part in building a sustainable future through employee ownership, inclusive governance, open book accounting, environmentally sustainable practices, and maintaining deep ties to the community and local farms. And next we have Israel Morales. Israel and his wife, Bonnie Morales, opened Kachka in Portland, Oregon in 2014 to share the food and drink of the former Soviet republics. Kachka has since received accolades from the likes of the James Beard Foundation, the New York Times, and Food and Wine magazine, and many others. The business expanded to include Kachka, which is a deli grocery. They also have a wholesale dumpling business and bottled spirits. Israel himself oversees all the front of house operations at Kachka, as well as their acclaimed beverage program. He's a certified sommelier and early in his career got a degree from the Cordon Bleu. And so thank you all for being here. We're really excited to host this panel and learn from you. Just before we dive into the questions, after we hear from the panelists, we will open up the discussion to a Q&A. So if you have any questions throughout, feel free to use the chat feature. We'll pick a couple to present to the panelists. Also, we are recording this panel, so if you feel it's helpful and would like to share it, we'll have it available probably later today and definitely tomorrow on our YouTube channel and social media. So with that, we will go ahead and get started. First question is for Cami with Cafe Olli. You and your partners were in the Portland food scene for a long time and recently branched out of a large group here in Portland, Oregon, with an employee-owned trust structure. Can you quickly describe what an employee trust is? And I know from talking to you and Brian that you were kind of shopping around different employment models. Can you describe why you decided to go with an employee trust?
Yeah, there's lots of forms of employee ownership, and I think they all share the same goal of being able to give profits back to employees. We landed on a trust. I think simply for the reason it does all of the things that we were looking for it to do, but it also is one of maybe more. We're hoping the intent is that it's a simpler form of it, that it will take less time from us to actually maintain it on a daily basis. The trust that we set up, 50% of the business holds it into the trust. And then the net profits from the business are distributed to the employees based on time and tenure at the restaurant. And the belief that we have, or the hope and the reason for it, is just that it creates equity and transparency, and that that people will get shares, and with the shares, they'll have some sort of ownership and contribution to the success of the business, that the work that we're all putting in collectively, we all are going to share in the success of that together. And then with it comes open book financing, because we also want people to understand, why our net profits are what they are, how we got there, and have a real understanding of what their profit distributions are, and understanding the whole system from start to finish.
That's awesome. And Cafe Olli opened in December, is that correct? The end of 2021?
Yeah.
Wow. So how has it been going so far? It's the newer of the restaurants in Portland, so it's very exciting.
It's very great. We couldn't have asked for a better opening. It's been great. It was bumpy, with Omicron and January and holidays. Yeah. We've had our challenges. We're figuring it out. We're very much learning. We're very much a new business as well. And all of these things that we are hoping to put into practice, we're learning as we're doing it.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And Israel, Kachka has been in Portland since 2014, so it's been here for quite a while. But you just recently, at the start of the year, updated your employment model to offer 100% healthcare coverage, profit sharing, and then removed tips in lieu of a service fee. What were the main motivational factors in Kachka's decision to change their employment model? How long were you researching it, and just how's it been going so far?
So since we opened, we had always offered some level of compensation with regard to health benefits or vacation pay, and we've seen a disparity between the front and back in general, but the disparity of, I think, restaurant industry compared to other industries and how they get compensated. So it's always been our goal to bolster that in some way. And, as the pandemic hit and we tried to navigate through that, we noticed a couple of things that were happening. One, people just weren't returning to work. And I think you touched on it earlier. One of the biggest things was that, they were just, this had been kind of bubbling toward the surface this entire time. And, now that people are crawling out of the pandemic, the hiring practices and thus the compensation is the same. And it's not possible to go back to the same way. And so we really thought that this was a good opportunity to kind of right the ship as we saw it and pay a little bit more equally for, this equitable work that's being performed. So that's why we went away from gratuity. We had been modeling something like that, just kind of in the background since last summer. So maybe about 6 months. we informed all of our staff 3 months before we rolled it out in January, and showed them that this is the new compensation package. Things that exist in other industries that may seem strange to restaurants. So, we started with a 3-pronged approach of offering 100% health benefits for all of our staff, removing gratuity altogether, taking a service fee of 22%, and then that allows us to pay, hire more salaried staff and pay a higherly wage across the board, with minimal losses from the front of house, and then backing that up with a profit sharing model so that, much to, other restaurants on this panel, a profit sharing model allows for us to have open accounting, open books to show where the money goes, how it's spent, what's left over, and then allows all of us to partake in those profits. So it's been something that's been brewing for a long time. And we were really excited that we had such a response coming out of the pandemic, particularly from guests who are just kind of frankly tired of having to, do the dance of what gratuity is, or the expectation of what a good server or a bad server should be earning. I was recently on a panel with regard to restaurant industry employees and housing issues, which was another big thing that we had issues with, is that most people in highly tourist areas, and Portland has been that way for a while, most people in the restaurant industry often can't live in the city in which they work. And we saw that no more true than in the back of house employees. And so offering those higher wages was a great incentive, but it gave us an opportunity to think forward to next year, the next 2 years of planning, to maybe incorporate vacation pay for everyone, maybe financial housing assistance for everyone, those sorts of things.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, that's, breaking away from the status quo of hospitality employment. It means also considering how can we raise the wages a bit, because minimum wage isn't a livable wage. And, it's very important and very true, I think, in a lot of cities where we have seen a lot of the restaurant staff can't actually afford to live in the city, and then they have to pay for transportation. And then that causes a lot, it's just a cycle, right? It all blends into staffing and employee turnover. And so, yeah, thank you for sharing. And then Jodi, so Black Star Co-op's been opened as the world's very first cooperatively owned and self-managed brew pub, and has been running for over a decade now. So you've been in this kind of mindset for a long time. Can you share a little bit about Black Star's history and how the co-op works, and why you feel it's had success so far?
Sure. So we were actually formed officially in 2006, and then opened our doors in 2010. So we're about to celebrate our 12-year anniversary. It was actually just started by a group of people that enjoyed home brewing and liked to hang out in backyards and drink together and talk about community, and had a lot of big visions for how to make Austin more community-based, which it is. It's a really awesome, small size, big city. And they decided to go the cooperative route. So similar to Cami and Israel's setups, there's a lot of similarities there. However, our cooperative structure is a hybrid model. A lot of people think that co-ops just kind of default to worker ownership. We're hybrid, so we're a consumer co-op that is owned by the community, and anybody over the age of 21 can become a member owner of Black Star. Right now, to date, I think we have almost 3,900, almost 4,000 people that are actually owners of Black Star, and all of our workers, which right now we have a staff of about 16 or 17, they are required to eventually become owners themselves throughout the first year of their employment at Black Star. It's a really unique model. It comes with a lot of challenges. We're democratically run, like you had mentioned, and I feel like I've learned more about the democratic process at Black Star than I ever did in school, and how wonderful and slow moving and frustrating and amazing it can be. The way that we work with this community ownership is we have 3 separate entities: the Workers Assembly, which is everyone that works at Black Star, those about 16 people right now. Then we have a board of directors, and they are charged with monitoring their policies that the workers' assembly then reports to the board to see whether or not we're in a compliance with those policies. And then we have the member owners, which are those 4,000 people, and they are charged with electing our board of directors and also with making any changes to our bylaws. But the workers themselves are 100% responsible for the operational success of the business. It's a very interesting way to way to operate. And yeah, I think that the long-term success of Black Star really has to do with that community ownership level, though. We've had a lot of ups and downs over the years. We've had a lot of different struggles. Just being a restaurant in a competitive market. When we first opened, we were one of less than 20 breweries in the Austin area. Now there's about 100 in the Austin area. So obviously with that increased competition as the city continues to grow, we face a lot of different challenges. But our community ownership, like all those folks that we reach out to on a regular basis, they really show up when we need them to. So when we've been in hard spots before, we'll really call on them to say, hey, we're doing this fundraiser, we're doing this, call to action right now. We need you guys to show up, and they do, because they've decided that they really want this space to continue on, and it's a very integral part of our city. We're kind of like a, one of the original like brew pubs, and just like just community ownership. I always bring up this example of the February storms that some of you may have heard about in Texas last year. During February, there was a big, very strange freeze. And luckily, myself and a coworker live across the street from Black Star. They didn't lose power. So we just went in, opened up shop, just the two of us. We're able to do that. And again, I'm not like the individual owner of Black Star, and neither is he, but we were able to say, like, okay, we can open this space for folks that are either needing water, needing heat, a place to charge your devices. And we had thousands of people show up. Being a brewery as well, we were able to provide clean water because we always have boiled water on hand. And we spent 3 days just operating with the two of us. And I had people coming in afterward just saying, like, I can't believe how important you are to this community. I had nowhere else to go, and I was able to get a hot meal, charge my phone, and sit someplace warm. And we experienced a lot of people signing up to become member owners after that week. So I think that was just a good symbol of how important that space is, and how we really just create that sense of community. And there's a word we use called Gemütlichkeit, which is a German word for kind of like second home, where we really just want everyone to feel comfortable and welcome. So I think that community ownership has really just translated into long-term success.
Yeah, I can see that translating to, money is really important. Health benefits are really important, but there's a lot more that goes on to job satisfaction and working for a company that you feel is doing good, and that you feel good doing good with that company is, a huge thing. So that's awesome. And so each of your restaurants that you're representing today has removed the tip structure. That is something that, we've seen in media happen quite a bit over the last 10 years from, small independent restaurants and big restaurant groups. Eventually, everybody that has made that spotlight has ended up bringing tips back at some point. Can you explain a little bit how you are planning to keep the no tip structure alive, and why it's so important that restaurants consider moving away from the tip structure?
I can start. I know that for us, so far it's been broadly really well received. I think that there is, especially in our community, a collective understanding of why tipping doesn't work, both from the employee and the consumer side. Like Israel said earlier, I think we're finding a lot of people, it takes the stress from the consumer away of knowing what's bad or good or how much is appropriate. And people just feel a sense of ease with it, which is really nice to see. For us, it's important because it helps us just know and properly plan and implement pay and benefits for our staff. And it creates, for our staff alone too, it helps in the way we can pay them. It's sustainable and it's not dependent on a tipping structure. So there's none of those anxieties or those fears of a bad shift or a good shift, a good day, bad day, or being and compensated incorrectly for being a good server or a bad server. And you can just have sustainable pay and you can know how much you're making on a consistent basis. And so
Yeah,
that's
that's important.
something to be able to maintain.
Awesome. Does Jodi or Israel have anything to add?
Yeah, I would say, over the years, we have seen a lot of folks, even in Portland, revert from a non-tipping system. And, no one likes being the pioneer. There are a lot of negatives sometimes when it comes to that. Over the pandemic, we started to see the rise of a lot of somewhat related or adjacent precedents that were being set. First of all, things that are like ticketed events, ticketed dinners, where you pay up front for your experience, whether it's a meal and a bottle of wine and it's gratuity, where you just show up and you've had that experience. 5-10 years ago, that was either non-existent or really uncommon. And so there's a precedent there. Years ago, in 2018, we, given the rising cost of healthcare and our commitment to provide healthcare for our employees, we implemented a 5% health and wellness fee to all of our bills. And although it was small and it didn't really pay for the entire health bill, it helped to offset those costs. And so our clientele, who's been with us for a long time, like there was a precedent there for them to understand that there is something else that doesn't have to do with rising food costs. And then I think most poignantly, of course, there are other restaurant industry professionals, like Cafe Olli, but other businesses too, that have gone away from the service or the gratuity model. The first summer of the pandemic, we opened up this huge outdoor setting, which if you've been to Kachka, is not something we do at all. We built an outdoor dining room and it was at the height of the pandemic. And so it was a very strange way to order and to dine at Kachka. And we implemented an automatic 20% gratuity at that time. And for basically glorified to-go food, no servers, no real plates, nothing, no interaction really with guests. And we found that 20% gratuity that was an auto grat was virtually no lashback, none. And so we started to see this is something that is becoming a little bit more ingrained in the public. And we feel like we don't have to be the pioneer because it's not other restaurant industry professionals doing it. It's the system overall that is encouraging it. So we thought that was really great.
Yeah, I think I can see too, from my own experience working in the restaurant industry, tips are loved by some, but also they cause a lot of issues with, if you ever want to buy a home or you want to do any financial stuff, it's a little bit harder. So it creates more stability. And like Cami said, stability financially, kind of what you can expect what to make, and you're not scrambling at the end of the month. And yeah, that's great. And talking about health benefits, which is a great segue to the next question, you all offer benefits in some way. How would you navigate implementing benefits, and what have been the challenges and solutions to those challenges so far?
I'm happy to talk about this a little bit.
Sure.
Health benefits has been, I always call it a racket, but it's just something that has to be evaluated constantly each year as things change and as the needs of our workers continue to change. Last year, our group health insurance, we only had a few people on the plan. Our group plan went up about 70%, which became unaffordable to both the worker and to Black Star. So through the help of Good Work Austin and people like Adam of Locadora, which is another restaurant in Austin, we have been talking with a direct primary care provider for a long time and finally decided to move in that direction. We still have, and it's been really great. It's very affordable. It's a local family doctor group, and they're really responsive, and it's only $15 a month to our workers. It's not traditional insurance. but we are offering a kind of like a bonus structure to reimburse anyone who is on a government plan or a self-funded plan. Additionally, we have dental insurance, which is still the traditional way, and that is more or less affordable. And then we also, within the last couple of years, started offering mental health services through a local nonprofit organization called the Mike and Cherry Project, which actually partners with all different restaurants to order really low cost counseling sessions to anyone in the restaurant industry. So luckily in Austin, there's really a lot of resources out there where we can kind of create this hodgepodge is what I've been calling it. But every year it still has to be evaluated and making sure that we're meeting those needs. So although this is what we came up with for 2022, it's very open to change at the end of this year when it's time to renegotiate again with traditional group insurance providers, and depending on how many people are interested in signing up. One thing that I always find interesting is how encouraging we have to be as employers, though, to get people to sign up for insurance, because a lot of times, even though we offer those things, it's kind of just like that restaurant mindset of, I'm young, I don't need insurance right now, but it's so important. So also that level of education where we have to kind of take some time to really train and teach our workers why it's important that we offer these things and why we continue to offer these things and why they should take advantage of those things.
Yeah, it's interesting. And then Israel and Cami, being in Oregon, have you run into any unique challenges, or how did you get started and benefits?
I mean, I know that for us as a new business, everything's challenging, and we're still very much figuring it out. We've landed on a self-funded plan that has supplemental benefits that are worked into it. But I think that, like Jodi said, it's something that we're going to have to be continually assessing and continually learning, and just knowing what is available out there and what is going to be the best option for everybody.
Yeah. And that kind of, sorry, go ahead, Israel.
I was just going to say, Kachka has taken a little more of a traditional approach in, partnering with a broker, a health benefits broker who shops our plan around. But to Jodi's point, our health insurance has never gone down. It goes up every single year. And it's really the challenge of price shopping, which is a constant thing that does have to happen every year, maybe even sometimes quarterly. But then also, when the mean age of your employees are 28, and I know that I didn't think I needed insurance at 28, it can be challenging because those decisions do affect the overall plan or the overall affordability. And so we are, after this year, we'd always been above 50 employees until the start of the pandemic. And so that's a threshold that greatly affects what you can do with health benefits. And so we had always had custom plans built for us. And now that we're under 50 employees, much to Jodi's point, I think we're going to have to start to create a hodgepodge of things. But thankfully, I have a few months still to figure that out.
And that, going to the next question, you all have kind of touched on this just now. Moving away from the traditional employment model of the hospitality industry, have you? What's staffing like? Like, have you had any challenges? Is there anything that you have learned?
I can speak to that really quickly. I will say that as far as back house employees are concerned, they're the easiest to talk to. You hear some really heartbreaking stories like, I've never had health insurance in my life, or I can actually buy a car. I've never done that. And so, you go to bed feeling pretty good about yourself. As far as the front of house is concerned, all of the challenges that we thought we would run up against have been surprising. Actually, the ebb and flow of hiring and people departing hasn't really changed. The reasons might change, but the percentages of in and out hasn't really changed that much. So we're encouraged by the new hires and new folks that are coming in, and some of the more veteran staff that have really started to understand the peripheral benefits of working with a career mindset. And so it's still challenging. It's still 100% challenging, but I guess for different reasons than we thought we'd be running up against.
Yeah. Jodi or Cami, did you want to share anything on any staffing challenges you've had?
Yeah, I'd be happy to just, mention that Black Star has always been a living wage establishment since we opened. We were no tipping since the beginning, and we've always, advertised fair worker treatment, a democratic environment, really like take agency in Black Star, which, we also offer paid time off, and like all the benefits that we are able to come up with. We really have always focused on that in order to fulfill that fair worker treatment model. But nobody, I don't think, is really immune to the staffing issues that have occurred in the last couple of years. We really kind of thought like, oh, we're ahead of the game. We've always been doing these things. So come on over here and work. And it's just like, it did not work out like that. And I totally understand it. And I side with the frustrations of restaurant workers who have just been treated so poorly for years and years, with not having paid time off, not having benefits, and all the things really that you most Americans have come to expect out of a job. So it's been really frustrating. And even though we've been a fair wage business from the beginning, we weren't always a service charge business. So when the pandemic really hit and we had a bunch of people voluntarily furlough, we realized that we were not able to keep up with our wage structure at any level. So even at Black Star's level, we were paying too much for the decrease in sales that we saw during the time, and we weren't paying enough for workers to really want to stay on board with Black Star. So we really had to reevaluate, and we started with a 5% service charge, which Israel, you had mentioned starting with that too, I think, for health and wellness. Our service charge is split between front and back of house workers. So it also helps create this equitable environment. And that's in addition to their base wage that they get. And then quickly we moved to 10%, which is now averaging, everybody's making a little bit over $20 an hour now that we've gotten a little bit busier. And it's a really great environment because not only does it encourage workers to want to bring more people into Black Star and help the overall health of the business, but it also makes everyone much more comfortable in what they're bringing home. So this was a big change to our business, actually. We had to really talk to our members about it, our board of directors, and say, hey, we're starting this service charge that's going to be a little bit different than what you guys are used to, because they're used to no tipping, no gratuity whatsoever. And it was received overwhelmingly positively by everyone that's come through the door so far. Like, people are like, why don't you push it up to 20%, and that's a really great feeling. We've just had very, very, very little backlash on something that we were very, very concerned about doing. So it's just been, super interesting to see how, but again, just to get back to the original question, still not immune to those staffing issues. It's still a struggle. And I think really, again, there's just a lot of education that needs to happen around talking to the restaurant industry workforce and how businesses like ours can kind of change that stigma.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too. In previous conversations, we had talked about how kind of going away from the status quo, which it seems like the ideal, offering benefits, the issues that have kind of surfaced around that industry, you still face staffing issues because we kind of have to workers have to change their mindset too and realize these having health benefits, having fair wage is important. And I think it was the National Restaurant Association did a survey and saw that the restaurant industry demographic is aging, and less younger people are coming into the industry, and people are kind of aging. And so having these benefits and supplemental tools and resources is actually really valuable moving on. So that's neat. And then that brings us to the last question, which I'll open to everybody, which is just what does the future of hospitality employment look like in your perspective?
I can start. I think that the industry is way too varied to have a singular vision of what the future will look like, and it's going to be different for everybody. I think that for us, our hopes are to just play a part in just having a restaurant that supports local food, sustainable practices where we can, and having a sense of community and being part of it and being able to provide the ways that it needs. I think that those are kind of the base important things to us. And then on top of that is just transparency and equity for everyone working within the restaurant and making sure that we're creating a sustainable working environment for everyone that's taking part.
I think, you know, one of the things that we really tried to solve with changing our pay structure kind of speaks to how we see the future of, at least for a type of restaurant that we are in the city that we're in, really comes down to education and growth. So having, take a front of house manager, for instance, in a traditional tipped model, they make less, sometimes half less than their subordinates. And there's no desire from an hourly server to become a manager, to grow in that way. And that's why you have servers that age out of the industry, because their knees give out before their desire to be out of the industry actually is. And so in kind of restructuring the way that we pay that, encouraging that upward mobility led to just kind of how we see the future of it happening. What I want to see, what we strive for, are folks coming in that may have customer facing jobs that are outside of the restaurant industry that will learn and grow over time. And I think that helps to create longevity. It establishes a core of your employees. And I think overall, everyone kind of walks away from having an opportunity to grow and have a career. And so those are the goals that we have. I don't know. I mean, I definitely agree that there's no one size fits all of what the future of the restaurant industry looks like. But as far as restaurants of our style and size, I think that there's a lot of room for the busser to have an incentive and have a realistic path to become the general manager, and that's kind of what we're focusing on.
That's great. Yeah, having career advancement opportunity is another one of those things outside of pay that it can be really important to employee retention, and just being able to provide a path for people can be more important in some aspects. So that's great. Jodi, do you have any last thoughts, or should we move on to the Q&A portion?
On the future of the restaurant industry, I have a lot of thoughts on the future of the restaurant industry. I think that the revolution is here, and I'm happy about it, and I support it. And I really think that moving away from the traditional problems in the restaurant industry that both Cami and Israel were touching on is super important and long overdue. So I'm really excited about all that has come out of the last 2 years in a positive way for creating a more equitable workplace for restaurant workers. But I am also concerned about small business and what that means for small businesses that really struggle to compete with large restaurant groups that have more money for hiring incentives and sign-on bonuses and hiring ads and more opportunities for better benefits. It's hard for the smaller businesses to manage that. But I feel positive about the future overall and the changes that are really being demanded right now.
Great. Thank you all for answering some of my questions, but now we'll move on to, we got a few questions from the audience. Let's see, we have a Veronica who asked, would any of you be willing to share specifics of your profit sharing model? Did you use a consultant who provided support in shaping it? Would anybody like to tackle this one? No. We can move on then to the next one.
Sorry, I'll
go
say
ahead.
a little bit. We don't have traditional profit sharing in the cooperative setup that other businesses have, but a lot of folks do consider the service charge as a profit sharing tool. I'm not really sure why. I'm not sure if I agree with that or not, but it is like money that comes in as income for the business and then is divided equitably between the front and back of house. And it certainly creates a better environment. There's a lot less friction between front and back of house, which I think is kind of common in a lot of restaurants and bars. But as far as like actual profit sharing, I can't really speak to that so much.
Yeah. Another question is, why is staffing still difficult? What have been the new reasons for turnover with this new employment models?
Yeah, I can speak to that. I mean, there's no real understanding as to why. I think, when you have a slow day at the restaurant, you can come up with a lot of reasons why you think it might be slow, but you can never really be sure. I think that the revolutions of the lifespan of a restaurant the revolutions have gotten quicker and the lifespan's gotten shorter. I also think that the tenure of employees as a result has gotten shorter too. So having an employee that stays in one position in one company for 10 years, like that doesn't happen, and particularly when it's not necessarily a grass is greener situation, but I think particularly when people are coming out of a pandemic, they've been running 200-300 covers with a mask on, like their lifespan is going to be really short. And sometimes it doesn't have to do with the wage structure that you've got going on or this awesome benefit package you have. Like they're just tired. And I see that burnout happen at a faster rate than we did beforehand. So that's why I think that the revolutions of hiring has just quickened.
Yeah. And then the last question, which I think, if Jodi, you do a lot of hiring through Poached, so you might be the best one to answer this, but just how do you market yourself when searching for new employees? So I would say this could be like, what do you put in your job ads? How do you attract people into your establishments?
I mean, I think we do the typical things. I have a little description about what Black Star offers as far as our benefits, wage structure, democratic environment, equity across the board, how we support the local food chain and all of those things. But I have not yet found any success in any of those things. We still struggle really bad with hiring. I think, kind of like Israel was just saying, the revolution of the lifespan of a worker has dramatically changed. Kitchen work is our biggest difficulty is hiring for our kitchen staff. And I think that just has a lot to do with it being, long hours on your feet, late nights, holidays. Traditionally, you don't have those benefits. And it's just, it's a hard life. Like I really respect anybody that can just kill it in the kitchen day in and day out, because it's a really, really tough job and you have to be really mentally and physically headstrong to be able to do that. And on the hiring end, like I was saying before, it's really difficult because we don't have the ad spend that larger companies have. So even with Poached, like we can boost these ads that we have out once a day, but we're quickly dropping to the bottom of the list when there's folks that have a lot more cash on hand than us to just like continuously pump money into it. So it's an ongoing difficulty. Word of mouth, I feel like, is the best option. If you get a good group of folks that are in there and they want to bring their friends on board, just talking about the co-op is awesome. And the ownership model that we have is really incentivizing to want to bring in your friends and create that sense of agency and ownership. and really just sharing across like as many platforms as possible. But it's a really big struggle. I'm not going to lie. And like I said earlier, I really thought that because Black Star was kind of ahead of the, ahead of the curve with our fair wage practices, that we would be pulling more people in after pandemic restrictions started to let up, but we just haven't seen that happen. And I think a lot of it has to do also with just the fact that everybody's changing their pay structures, which is awesome, but we're so understaffed right now as like a nation and as a city that if somebody starts work at Black Star and they get another job the next day that pays more, they're just going to go and take it because they haven't yet become a part of the Black Star culture. So it's just that turnover can be really quick. I'm open to suggestions from anybody that.
Right. Yeah, I'd love to add to that. That's a really good point, is because, it's not one company that is changing their structure. There are a number of places that are doing it. We're just 2 here in Portland and 1 in Austin, but there are so many. And I think that particular style of market hasn't settled down yet. And so you're right. Like, I have a good idea, across the street has a good idea, and it just happens to be that they pay more, so they're going to go there, even though we're still upholding the same principles. So I think the market is going to take some time to actually settle down into this new environment before we actually see, because our deficit is not in the back of the house, it's in the front of house. I know that our strategy of hiring has really been less about a restaurant worker and someone who's customer service facing, because that person who works at Walgreens, who's really good at their job, that person who works at Macy's or who works at Starbucks, like they probably would love to have, a higher hourly rate and free health benefits, and they just happen to be really good with people. And so I think instead of like really digging deep into like, let's find that 10-year veteran server, like that's not going to happen really. That doesn't really exist anymore. And so that's been our strategy, is just looking to find those seeds that we can grow.
Great. Yeah, having kind of like an open mind to who's actually showing up to the interviews, and do they have, the soft skills and the potential, which is, maybe a little bit more important than just having the experience. That's definitely something we see on Poached, and especially since, in Oregon, we've reopened a little bit later than Austin and other places, but, you just see you get the green light to reopen, and then the competition just skyrockets. Everybody's posting jobs at the same time, and it becomes a little bit more difficult. I mean, we try to advocate, you really have to sell it. It's not about, I need somebody to fill this job anymore. It's like, what can we provide for you? This is, why work for us over the competition, basically, is kind of what we've been seeing on the back end. But with that, we're gonna close the panel. I just want to thank everybody for being here today. As mentioned earlier, it starts with a conversation, and taking the time to listen to your peers, and having opportunities like this to discuss and just hear how each of your experiences worked out for you and what you have going on. So thank you to all the panelists. Thank you to the audience for your interest in this topic today. We plan at Poached to do a lot more of these panels. So if you have any feedback or topics you'd like us to cover in the future, please feel free to reach out to us. You can reach us at social@poachedjobs.com or media@poachedjobs.com. Yeah, and if you have any questions about this panel that we didn't get to cover, feel free to reach out to us at those channels as well. And as mentioned earlier, we've recorded this, so we're going to release it, on our social channels and our YouTube probably later today. So feel free to share. But with that, I will let everybody enjoy their Tuesday. Thank you so much.